Welcome into the STO Fantasy Playbook in the Hyundai Studios in beautiful downtown Cleveland. I'm Will Ewick, joined alongside Not Father Time, Ryan Kavanaugh here for our last edition of STO Fantasy Playbook. We're giving out an awards. We know we helped some of you, hopefully, win some championships. I know Brady Gaga won the STO championship, but it's not time to brag. It's time to hand out our awards. So, Ryan, I did win, though. So my awards are going to be number one. You can have second place, though.
I thought we weren't bragging. But go right ahead.
I am humble. So let's move on here. The first award we're giving out is the most overrated first-round pick, the biggest bust. And in my opinion, it was Ryan Matthews. A lot of people drafted him to be the number one running back for their squad. This was a guy they thought was going to have a lot of touchdowns on an explosive San Diego Chargers team. Was not the case, as you see there. Only had 1 TD, 12 fumbles. He finished below guys like Vic Ballard and Danny Woodhead. Those are guys that weren't even drafted. To me, big-time bust for Ryan Matthews.
Yeah, one rushing touchdown out of a guy who was first round or very early in the second round. That's just flat out terrible. For me, the second place pick, as you allowed me to have, which I appreciate, LeSean McCoy.
Take care of you.
Yeah, I see that. LeSean McCoy, and a reason for that was injury. While he was in the game, he performed. But out of a first-round pick for me, I need him to lead me into the playoffs and then up to the championship. Pivotal weeks right before the playoffs and through the first couple rounds, you couldn't count on him because he wasn't playing because of concussions unless you were able to pick up Bryce Brown in his stead. That was a first-round bust for me, LeSean McCoy.
So we talk about first-round bust. Let's talk about late-round people that you grabbed late in the round that turned out to save your team. I'm going to look at Randall Cobb here, a wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. 80 receptions, 954 receiving yards. He was a top 20 wide receiver drafted late in the rounds. And you could say that it was because of Greg Jennings' injury. You could say it was because Jermichael Finley saw a decrease in targets. Either way, this was a great pickup. Randall Cobb, if you drafted him, you got a very good value late in the game.
I'm even going to throw in from the Packers, James Jones led the league in touchdowns, and he might have been the fourth guy after you mentioned Nelson, Jennings, Finley. Throw Cobb in there. But for me, Alfred Morris from the Washington Redskins, and not only a late-round pickup, this is a guy that was on the waiver wire post-draft. Week in and week out, this guy was a touchdown monster, especially in those pivotal playoff weeks. If you were lucky to have a league that went into week 17, 42 points out of Alfred Morris. The guy was a monster all year long.
Ryan, what do we talk about every week on this show? Consistency. Who was the most consistent? Tom Brady. If you look up consistency in Webster's dictionary, you will find a picture of Tom Brady probably smiling ear to ear, maybe with his girlfriend Gisele Bundchen, I don't know. But Tom Brady was consistency. 98.7 QB rating. This was a guy that just every week, week in and week out, gave you great numbers. Now, there were a couple mediocre Tom Brady weeks, but they were still good weeks for any other quarterback. He never had those single digits. Tom Brady led Brady Gaga to a championship. I'm sure he led others as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a little bit of a sentimental pick and a pick that's kind of off the map that people weren't expecting. I mean, everybody knows Brady in the NFL and in fantasy. He delivers year in and year out. Nobody knew what to expect from RG3. What he gave you outside of that week where he missed against the Cleveland Browns and didn't play, he was a stud week in and week out, especially as the games got bigger. When Washington needed to win to get into the playoffs and win their conference, he stepped up. And when you needed him to help you get into the fantasy finals, he stepped up. So for me, RG3, consistent all year long.
So you have these consistency guys, and they certainly help you, but everyone has injuries on their team to deal with. So these guys that you can get that have the late season heroics are very crucial. So now it's time to give the award for the best late season heroics. And for me, I talked about him more than my own mother over the past couple of months. And it's Denario Alexander from the San Diego Superchargers. He steps in 0 every single week until he finally gets in. If you could overlook the one goose egg in week 15, he had double digits in PPR week 10 on. Really helped a lot of people win their championship if they got past that week 15. 4 TDs in just half the season. He only played a few games there, so if you were lucky enough to get him off the waiver wire late in the season, he really helped you out.
If you were my pick for number 2, if you were lucky enough to take the gamble that a lot of people weren't and draft Adrian Peterson coming off that knee injury in week 16 last week, boy, did you look smart. Adrian Peterson, there's consistency, and then there's improving play each week with consistency. And that's what Adrian Peterson gave you, a beast throughout the entire playoffs. From really week 10 on, he kept getting better. And if you had Adrian Peterson on your fantasy team, you probably made it to the finals of your league.
And those were a couple of guys that helped you late in the game. But as we know, there's on the converse side, guys that really dropped off and probably hurt you and took you out of the playoffs. That guy for me was Victor Cruz, because Victor Cruz was drafted as a #1 wide receiver, had a pretty good season going along, and then the Giants just fell off the face of the earth. In week 15 and 16, those are the playoffs, Ryan. He had 2 of the worst weeks of the season. You just can't have that. Even in a PPR, he only had 4 and 5 points. If you were lucky enough to get past the 4-point week, you probably didn't make it past the 5-point week. He probably is the reason why you were in the consolation bracket.
Right. My pick here for late season drop-off also would be a candidate for the first-round bust. That's Larry Fitzgerald. With all due respect to Larry Fitzgerald, still one of the top wide receivers in the league. This wasn't really his fault. He had terrible quarterbacks trying to throw him the football. But since week 11, he had 3 weeks with only a single catch. Throw in a 2-catch week, a 3-catch week. You need more from Larry Fitzgerald. Unlike Adrian Peterson, where I just said if you had him, you were probably in the finals. If you were counting on Larry Fitzgerald, you may not even have made the playoffs, because he gave you virtually nothing in the second half of the season.
Hopefully Larry Fitzgerald took your with all due respect. I know he is a weekly watcher. We move on to our final award here, and this is the most frustrating of all, the most frustrating injury. And it happens every year. There's certain guys that you're just dealing with. Darren McFadden's name gets thrown out a lot, but to me, you know you're taking that risk when you get him. To me, it was Pierre Garçon, and this is the reason why. You drafted him probably to be your #2 wide receiver. First week, he explodes, has a great first week, and you're thinking, man, I got a steal right here for where I probably took him. And then there's some type of injury, Ryan, but it's not, hey, the injury is for the rest of the season. It's not, it's 3 or 4 games. It's week to week. So every week you're monitoring this guy. You don't know whether or not you're going to replace him. He misses over half the season. About the time you get ready to cut bait and say, the heck with this, I'm moving on, he comes back and finishes very well at the end of the season. So to me, a very frustrating own was Pierre Garçon.
Yeah, I agree. It's frustrating when you want to use him and you can't, and then you don't have faith in him and he blows up and you say, well, what have I've been waiting all these weeks for that, Pierre, and then you drop that on me. For me, Jordy Nelson. In the last 8 weeks of the season, he missed part or all of 7 games. This is a second, third-round pick. We talked about James Jones and Randall Cobb getting a lot of those receptions from Aaron Rodgers. Those were supposed to go to Jordy Nelson, and if you had him on your roster, not a guy you can count on, and he probably burned you when he tried to come back and only caught 1 ball. That happened in a couple games. So for me, Jordy Nelson, huge frustration and disappointment.
Well, that'll do it for STO Fantasy Playbook this season. We thank you for watching. Hopefully we helped you win some weeks, maybe even a championship, and we are still expecting those checks to start rolling in for if we did help you. For Ryan Kavanaugh, I'm Will Ewick reminding you, it's your fantasy. We just happen to be in it.